In the shadowed, icy depths of Leningrad in 1941, where the city's bones rattled beneath relentless bombardment and starvation gnawed at the souls of its inhabitants, Lena moved with a purpose forged in fire and fortified by unyielding justice. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, had seen too much misery, yet they burned with a fierce determination that refused to be extinguished. She was known among her compatriots as the Justiciar, a woman whose moral compass pointed unwaveringly toward vengeance for the innocent and retribution against those who wielded tyranny without mercy. That fateful winter, as the Nazi siege tightened its suffocating grip, Lena discovered a clandestine plot brewing among the occupying officers, a scheme that involved smuggling oil, stolen from the city's limited reserves, to fuel their machines of destruction. The officers, led by the ruthless Major Strauss and the cunning Captain Weber, were known for their cruelty and cunning, dismissing the suffering of the oppressed with callous indifference. But Lena, lurking in the shadows of her ruined neighborhood, heard whispers of their plans and knew she had to act. Disguised in rags that barely concealed her fiery spirit, she infiltrated their hidden caches, employing her wits and resourcefulness to sabotage their efforts. One night, under the pale moonlight filtering through shattered windows, she crept into the enemy's depot, clutching a small vial of homemade incendiary she had crafted from discarded chemicals and scraps. An act of desperation turned into a weapon of justice. As she poured the boiling oil into the tanks, she whispered a silent prayer, her hands trembling, yet resolute. The officers, unaware of her presence, gathered around their fuel supplies, smug and dismissive. Then, a sudden hiss and crackling erupted. The oil ignited with a fierce roar, flames licking the night sky as explosions echoed across the icy streets. In that blaze, 7 of Hitler's officers, caught in the inferno of Lena's vengeance, were consumed by the very oil they sought to command. Their screams faded into the chaos, replaced by the crackle of flames and the distant wail of sirens. Lena, standing amidst the wreckage, felt a fleeting surge of victory. Yet her heart knew this was only a fragment of the long, arduous battle ahead. Her resolve hardened further. Justice was not a fleeting act, but a relentless crusade against the darkness threatening to swallow her city. With her fists clenched and her breath forming icy clouds in the air, she disappeared into the shadows once more, her mind already scheming the next move, her soul forever scarred yet unbroken, embodying the indomitable spirit of Leningrad's defenders. The flames danced wildly in the cold, dark night, casting flickering shadows over the battered, snow-dusted streets of Leningrad, where Lena stood amidst the wreckage of her daring act. Her heart hammered in her chest, a mixture of adrenaline and bitter resolve swirling within her as she watched the inferno consume the Nazi officers who had come too close. Their smug arrogance turned to panic as the oil ignited with a deafening roar. "You underestimated us," she whispered through clenched teeth, her voice trembling yet fierce. Her fingers, trembling slightly from the cold and the rush, clutched a small vial of oil she had covertly gathered, her secret weapon born from desperation and cunning. The officers, caught unaware, scrambled in chaos. But Lena had calculated every step, her plan meticulously woven in the shadows, her mind sharp as the icy wind that's slicing through her coat. As the flames devoured the men, screams erupted, muffled beneath the roar of burning fuel and the crackling of collapsing structures. She saw one officer stumble, clutching at his chest as the heat pressed in, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. "This is justice," Lena muttered, voice cold, yet resolute. She moved swiftly, slipping into the darkness, her silhouette blending with the jagged outlines of ruined buildings. The smell of burnt oil and charred flesh clung to the air, a grim reminder of her act of vengeance. But her mind was already racing ahead, plotting the next strike, aware that her battle was far from over. Her face, streaked with soot and tears, betrayed neither fear nor relief, only an unyielding determination etched into her features. "They will never forget what we're willing to do," she thought fiercely, her breath forming ghostly clouds as she disappeared into the labyrinth of broken alleys. For Lena, this was more than revenge. It was a sacred vow carved into her soul to burn away the darkness encroaching on her home, no matter the cost. The flames still flickered behind her, casting a dying glow over the snow-covered rubble, while her resolve burned brighter than ever, ignited by the very fire she had unleashed. Under the pallid glow of the dying sun, Lena crouched behind a shattered wall, her breath forming misty clouds that mingled with the acrid smoke curling from the burning wreckage. Her eyes, sharp and unyielding, flicked across the chaos. A convoy of German officers, their faces twisted with arrogance and brutality, oblivious to the silent storm brewing in the shadows. As the muffled hum of engines and the clink of metal, gears faded into the background, she reached into her coat with a trembling but determined hand, clutching a small but potent vial of heated oil she had carefully prepared earlier. Her mind replayed the images of her family, the icy streets of Leningrad, and the countless nights of starvation and despair that fueled her fury. She knew this act would be her last, her final stand against the oppressive forces that had gripped her city in a suffocating chokehold. With a swift, practiced motion, she pulled the pin, and the vial shattered against the engine block of one of the trucks, releasing a torrent of blazing oil that immediately ignited in a seething, roaring inferno. Flames erupted with a ferocity that painted the gray sky in shades of crimson and gold, crackling like furious spirits unleashed from hell. The officers, caught off guard, reeled in confusion and panic, their screams drowned by the furious roar of the fire. Lena didn't wait for their reactions. She moved swiftly, slipping into the shadows once more, her heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and grim satisfaction. "That's the taste of justice," she whispered fiercely, voice trembling yet unwavering. As she watched the inferno consume the machinery and bodies alike, she knew her actions would stir a storm, that reprisals would come. But she also understood that her city's scarred soul demanded retribution, no matter the cost. As she melted into the darkness, her silhouette became a ghost, a symbol of relentless defiance against the monstrous machinery of war. The flames flickered behind her, casting long, dancing shadows over the rubble-strewn streets, while her mind burned brighter than ever, fueled by the unbreakable spirit of resistance that refused to be extinguished. In that moment, Lena was no longer just a woman seeking vengeance. She was a living torch, igniting the ember of hope in a city desperate to survive the icy grip of tyranny. Under the pallid glow of a moon, veiled by swirling clouds of ash and smoke, Lena crouched behind a shattered wall, her breath rasping in her throat. Her hands, trembling yet resolute, clutched a battered canister filled with a sinister concoction, an oily, viscous liquid she had meticulously crafted from burned engine remnants and discarded industrial waste. Tonight, her city's silent scream for justice found voice in her clandestine vengeance. Her eyes darted across the empty, bomb-ravaged street, where twisted metal and charred corpses bore witness to the chaos of destruction. The distant, muffled sounds of marching boots grew louder as the German patrol approached, their voices a harsh discord against the whispering wind. "They think they own this city," Lena murmured, her voice cold and fierce, as she pulled a match from her coat. She struck it against the rough surface of a nearby stone, the flame flickering alive in darkness. With a calculated breath, she flicked the match onto the oily pool she had carefully poured onto the ground, igniting it instantly. The fire burst forth with a roar, licking hungrily at the pavement, engulfing the patrol's vehicle in a roaring inferno. The officers shouted in alarm, scrambling to extinguish the flames, But Lena was already moving, her silhouette a flash of determination against the inferno's glow. Slipping through the shadows, she reached the fallen engine block, her hands grasping a heavy wrench she had hidden for moments like this. Her mind flashed with memories of her family, of loved ones lost in the relentless siege, fueling her fury. As the officers struggled to regain control amid the chaos, she leapt into action, dousing their uniforms with the remaining oil, causing the fabric to ignite in a sizzling, blackened blaze. "This is for every breath you stole," she hissed, watching their screams echo through the smoke-choked air. The flames danced cruelly, their heat scorching her cheeks as she backed away carefully, a ghost of vengeance enveloped in smoke and shadow. Every movement was a testament to her unyielding resolve, a woman who refused to let tyranny drown out the voice of her city, a justice seeker whose fiery spirit refused to be extinguished, no matter how fierce the storm. Her heart hammered in her chest, yet her mind was clear. This was only the beginning. Lena's silent vow echoed in the darkness. As long as she drew breath, the monsters of war would never claim her city's soul without a fight. Under the shattered remnants of dawn, the battered streets of Leningrad echoed with the distant rumble of artillery. Yet within the shadows of a crumbling warehouse, Lena's heart thundered with a different kind of storm. Her eyes, fierce and unyielding, flicked across the chaos surrounding her. Scarred buildings, abandoned shells of tanks, and the twisted carcasses of fallen soldiers, and found her target, the group of high-ranking Nazi officers, all smug and oblivious to the fury simmering just beneath their polished exteriors. They had been mocking her city's suffering, dismissing the resilience of its people, and now they faced a reckoning no one could have anticipated. Lena moved with calculated precision, her breath steady despite the pounding in her chest. She clutched a small, battered can of engine oil, her secret weapon, her silent declaration of justice. As she stepped closer, the officers' smug laughter echoed in her ears, a cruel soundtrack to their arrogance. 1. A tall man with a crooked mustache sneered. "What's this little girl doing here? Scared of a little fight?" He barely had time to finish before Lena was upon him, her movements swift and silent. With a deft flick, she poured the black viscous oil over his uniform, the slick spreading like a toxic ink stain. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she produced a match, the flame dancing in her eyes as she struck it against the rough surface of her boot. "Let's see how tough you are now," she whispered, voice trembling but resolute. She held the flame close to the oil-soaked fabric, and in an instant, the uniform erupted in flames, a sizzling, hissing inferno that swallowed the officer's screams in a cloud of black smoke. His face contorted in horror as the flames crept greedily up his chest, the oily fabric crackling and bubbling like a living thing. The other officers, startled, reached for their weapons, but Lena was already retreating, her shadow flickering against the smoky backdrop. "Justice doesn't burn out," she muttered under her breath, her voice rasping with adrenaline. Her mind raced as she moved stealthily through the debris, every step a testament to her unwavering resolve. She would make them pay for every life lost, every breath stolen by their brutality. The flames she had ignited weren't just a punishment, but a symbol of defiance, a blazing sign that tyranny's darkness could never extinguish the spirit of her city. Her heart pounded with the thrill of rebellion, yet beneath that fire was a deeper, more profound purpose, a vow that, as long as she drew breath, she would stand against the monsters of war, and no matter how fierce the storm, she would fight until her last breath to keep Leningrad's soul alive. In the suffocating gloom of that bitter winter night, Lena moved like a phantom through the shattered alleys of Leningrad, her breath frosting in the piercing cold as her mind burned with fiery resolve. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, flicked toward the group of Nazi officers who had been tormenting her city for months, their faces twisted with arrogance and cruelty. Tonight, justice would be served, not with guns or bombs, but with a savage, calculated act that would leave a mark etched into the very bones of their monstrous regime. She had prepared meticulously, her hidden stash of engine oil, thick and black as midnight, stored in a battered tin she'd kept concealed beneath the rubble. The plan was simple yet ruthless. Infiltrate their encampment, douse their vehicles and weapons with her secret weapon, and ignite a conflagration that would scream defiance across the frozen streets. As she crept closer, the faint scent of fuel mingled with the acrid smoke rising from distant fires, a haunting reminder of how close death was lingering. Through a broken window, she saw them, 7 officers, fat and bloated from their cruelty, laughing over their latest atrocities as they toasted with vodka. A bitter smile curled her lips. She remembered their faces vividly, each one a symbol of the barbarity that had crushed her homeland, and she clenched her fists. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of her fury. "This is for every child, every mother, every soul you've stolen." With a quick flick, she poured the steaming oil over the engines, watching as it seeped into every crevice, coating metal with slick darkness. Then, clutching her makeshift torch, a rag soaked in kerosene, she struck a flame that danced with a dangerous, eager flicker. A gasp escaped her lips as she hurled the torch into the oily mess, the explosion erupting in a roar that shook the ground beneath her feet. Flames erupted like a furious beast, engulfing the vehicles and turning the officers' faces into masks of panic and horror. Their shouts were drowned out by the crackling inferno. But Lena saw their eyes, wide with terror, disbelief, and rage, as the fire consumed them. In that moment, she felt a peculiar surge of victory, a sense that she had turned the very machinery of their terror into her weapon of justice. She knew this act wouldn't end the war, but it was a spark, an incendiary defiance against the darkness that had threatened to swallow her city whole. As she melted back into shadow, her heart pounding with adrenaline and purpose, she whispered, to herself, "Justice isn't just a word. It's a fire that burns inside, and tonight I've fed it well." The flames blazed behind her, a searing testament that even in the depths of despair, hope, and vengeance could ignite a blaze impossible to extinguish. Narrative development following. Desenvolvimento específico da narrativa, seguindo rigorosamente o prompt original. Parte 19. The story continues exploring the central themes of the original prompt, with unique characters and engaging situations that keep the reader interested in the development of events and conflicts presented in a rich and detailed manner. Under the dim, flickering glow of the oil lamp she had rigged to a small makeshift furnace, Lena moved with calculated precision. The cold, oppressive air of Leningrad's battered streets was thick with smoke and desperation, but her mind was a tempest of determination. She had learned long ago that justice was often forged in the fires of chaos, and tonight she burnished her resolve into a weapon sharper than any sword. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, flicked across the room as she prepared her most daring ambush yet. The 7 Nazi officers, commanders of brutality and death, had been a thorn in her side for months, their arrogance fueling her silent fury. She remembered their smug faces, the way they had sneered at the suffering of her city, their voices echoing in her nightmares. Tonight she would turn their own machinery of destruction against them. With a deft hand, she poured a mixture of engine oil, thick, dark, and viscous, into a makeshift container. The plan was reckless, a dangerous gamble, but Lena thrived on that edge. Her heart pounded in her chest as she crept through the shadows, her small frame slipping past debris and broken glass, every step silent yet charged with purpose. She had concealed the oil-filled vessel beneath her coat, and now she approached the convoy of German officers, who were arrogantly inspecting their armored vehicles amidst the ruin of the city they sought to crush. One officer, a tall man with a cruel sneer and a cigarette pinched between his fingers, turned as she drew near, sensing movement. "What's this?" he barked, eyes narrowing. Lena's voice was steady, cold as winter's steel. "A gift," she whispered, a faint smile curling on her lips. Before they could react, she threw the vessel with all her might, the thick oil, splattering across the engine of the nearest tank with a sickening squelch. The officers shouted in surprise as the oil ignited instantaneously, the flames roaring to life, licking greedily at the engine. The heat was intense, a blistering wave that made the officers stumble back, their uniforms catching fire, as the oil turned into a cruel inferno. "Burn!" Lena spat, her voice a fierce cry of defiance as she watched the chaos unfold. The flames spread rapidly, melting metal and igniting the surrounding vehicles, turning their machinery of destruction into a pyre of their own making. The officers, engulfed in the inferno, screamed in agony, their shouts drowned out by the crackling of burning steel. Lena's heart hammered in her chest, a mixture of adrenaline and righteous fury coursing through her veins. She had done what no one else dared. She had turned their weapons of terror into flames of justice. As the fire consumed the convoy, she melted back into the shadows, knowing that her act of rebellion had sown chaos in the heart of their command. Her eyes, smoldering with suppressed rage and triumph, flicked upward toward the darkened sky, an unspoken promise that the fight for her city was far from over, and her justice burned brighter than ever.